Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Great. Is there feedback coming from my side at all?
No, you sound wonderful.
Great.
It actually is clearer than I remember. Maybe it was pretty clear from last month when we had your 100 videos. But by the way, I'm putting this on YouTube as well.
Great.
Hi,
Can you hear me all right?
Hello.
Great. Is there feedback coming from my side at all?
No, you sound wonderful. You're getting feedback now. Hi, Atticus.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So you are here back in DC.
I am. My apartment is bad with large packages, so I'm currently using my ironing board as a desk because they sent mine back.
They sent your desk back?
Yeah. And my bed frame.
Your apartment building?
Yeah.
Oh.
They apparently don't accept packages over 25 pounds unless you email them, but I emailed them and they still sent it back. So I'm just going to try to get it sent to a friend's house and then figure out a way to lug it here.
Oh my God. Well, you can send it to me. I will accept all, it'll just, be left. That is ridiculous. That's called the most lazy management I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Here's Tanisha. Tanisha would, hello. It's been so long.
Hello.
How are you, Tanisha? I can't wait to catch up. Atticus may have a more, as equal horror story of moving.
No. I don't want anybody to have to go through the bullshit.
So this is what it is. Apparently, the apartment building sent back all of his packages that were over 25 pounds.
They said you have to email us if you're gonna have a large package. And then I emailed them saying a large package is gonna come on this day. Just let me know and I'll come down and get it. And then they sent back my bed frame and my desk. Oh. So I'm using an ironing board and sleeping on a mattress on the floor.
Those are the most important pieces of furniture one would need.
Yeah.
And so, oh my God. No, and I went to a key because I finally decided my daughter's virtual, we're virtual and American. I was like, I gotta upgrade from just sitting on my bed because we gotta separate, the sleeping and the working. So I went to IKEA 2 weeks ago, and there was only one type of desk left because we're all getting. That's why I'm like, Atticus, you gotta get that desk. They might run out. And it was 62 steps. So.
Ooh. Yeah, that's the thing. When I, finished relocating into the new spot, I needed a new couch. I decided, toss the old stuff, just upgrade, get all new stuff. And the couches that I wanted, out of stock. No one had anything that I wanted because everyone is just renovating their houses. They're like, we got to chill here. Might as well make it comfortable. They're making, their own home tailgate, cornhole sold out everywhere. People are buying wood, making up their own stuff. There was no couches. So finally, I went to so many different stores and finally just went to a place and the first one I was like, do you have it? Is it in stock? And they're like, yeah, we have it. I was like, good, done. Here, take my money. Fuck, I can't, I'm not waiting anymore.
It's a pretty good couch for one that you just kind of took because you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm chill with it.
Wait, Tanisha's stealing couches now?
That's what you have to do in COVID time. So,
nice.
You got to do it, because I was saying how desks, I went to IKEA and they had only one type of desk left. And for some reason, I forgot that IKEA, at least the store I went to, you have to get the boxes yourself when you go down. I happen to, for some reason, be wearing a short skirt, which I can't believe because I've been usually wearing yoga pants. And so I finally had to ask someone because I would either flash everybody to get that. But I got it. And it barely fit in my car, but I have the equipment. And I hope, Atticus, you get your desk. And
just have me write them an email because when I threaten the hell out of these people, they paid for my moving expenses. So
and where are you? Are you off of Mass Ave, Atticus?
I am. Yeah, I'm in one of the
trashy
apartments right outside of AU.
Okay, I think I know the name. I'm not going to say it here to just slander or anything, but yeah, they could be doing better. Thank you guys. It's so good to see my COVID cohorts. I've missed you.
COVID.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Is that all we are? Just COVID cohort.
Oh my God. Because it's been a week transitioning, and I'm sure Atticus can know, like, we're all still finding our ways virtually. Yeah, well, I have to hear. But welcome to this fall kickoff of the semester. This is a writing and fighting. This is my special Wednesday class where I'm holding all guest speakers and panels and my special in-house writing and fighting VIPs as we have here now. And we will go around. And that is because I have classes Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But most of the students in my class are in China. I have 30 total students between the two classes, and 20 of them are there. And so I've kind of worked it out that they can watch my video or my class asynchronously, because they would be tuning in at 2:30 and 4 p.m. or 4 a.m., 2:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. And as I noticed the first week, it was a challenge. And we want to make this enjoyable. This is writing and fighting. This is some good, quality curriculum. And so it's great though, because now this aspect, this Wednesday class, I can pretty much go off the curriculum and do my work and stuff. Now, Josh, if I can introduce you first, they're all buying. And that's why I'm saying, did your publisher say you had an increase of ebooks in China? Because we're going to be starting with.
It's fantastic. I love it. It's got international flair.
Yeah. American no longer. Remember, Atticus, you got one of these?
I have it on my bookshelf.
Okay.
Good man, Atticus.
It's great. From a young student to China to Chris Roy in the Mississippi Penitentiary.
That's right.
This is a key thing to have. All right, can I see? All right.
Here.
Yeah, got mine right there.
Oh my God.
See, this is the best Zoom call ever. I don't know if I told you, Nancy, but I talked to Julie Kedzie, and I guess maybe a month into the whole COVID thing, and she told me that she had planned on using my book for her writing and fighting class, and right like the moment before all the students were supposed to go buy my book, they canceled school. So all of those, I made bets with that money. I paid debts with that money, and it's gone.
Oh my God. Sorry.
Yeah.
So when did this get canceled? You're canceled.
It must have been, I guess, April or whenever all the colleges were shutting down. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had I had music in a commercial once, Josh. And it was in this big campaign for the Amex, Tiger Woods, this whole thing, right? It had just started, the campaign had just started, and then 9/11 happened.
Oh man.
And all the ad campaigns just stopped. Everything went to like black screens for everything, right? And it was very Larry David of me, because 9/11 happened and I was, still like affected by this, like, I lost all this money, but it was rough. So I can sympathize with that feeling.
I appreciate that, man. Make me feel a little better about myself, because it did feel a little selfish.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. I'm so out of practice. I'm now sending the link on Twitter. I'm kind of out of practice. So how about everyone goes around? By the way, Professor Nancy Kidder, Writing and Fighting at American University, and also a consultant at Books at Work. And just so glad to see my over intellectualizing group to talk writing and fighting. All right. How about we go to Josh, and then as I do my other stuff, you can explain who you are.
Hi, I'm Josh Rosenblatt. I'm the author of Why We Fight, which is on the curriculum of writing and fighting. And longtime panelist, enthusiastic panelist. Happy to be here. I haven't had a good MMA conversation in weeks, so this will be good.
Are you doing the daily dots, or just for the pay-per-view?
Daily dot is over. Daily dot is over. They passed me on to a new editor, and I sent him one story. And he said something about I texted Tanisha the phrase, but it was something like it didn't go viral, or it didn't get a lot of play or something like that. And it was just the last time we spoke to each other. It wasn't going to work out. The vocabularies we didn't mesh.
I get it. Well, that's you, Josh, is that you have principles. You wouldn't bring your writing to match what that, editor wanted. And I love that about you.
It really is. I had this thought the other day that because I started in journalism, 10, 12 years ago, like right when journalism was starting to fall apart. And as life has gone on, it really just feels like jumping from sinking ship to sinking ship. I'm sorry to say this at the beginning of a class about the future of writing, but sometimes it definitely feels like you're just going from raft to raft and waiting for that whatever publication you're writing for to get bought up by a investment company and fire all the writers. Your student should absolutely go into careers in writing.
Yes. Yes, I love it. No, I mean, we could talk about this. And Brian, with your great interview with Chuck Mindenhall, can I go to you, Brian? Because that was really interesting. I don't think Mindenhall had given an interview.
Yeah, well, I think the way to do it is to just not call it an interview and let him hang out at his bar in his basement and just, have a chat. That's kind of what we do, right? So
yeah, exactly. Well done.
So yeah, that was a fantastic time, and thanks for being a part of it. Yeah.
Brian, just so Art Fight Podcast had their 100th episode.
Yeah, it's true. So I rarely see things through in life, right? When you're an artist and a creative, you tend to stir up a lot of pots, but it's really hard to really put the meal together, kind of thing. And so the podcast is like the one thing where I feel like it's been right sized enough, and just we just have a rhythm with it, and it's just kind of like a thing. It's just we just do it, and so there's really something to just sticking with it. And so when it culminated in that 100th episode, all those shenanigans, it was fantastic. And there was some conversation in that episode too that I know will dovetail nicely into what one of the things we'll probably get into with respect to Brock Lesnar and all that kind of ridiculousness.
I just read that, and I'm glad, because that's when I kind of want to say, that GIF where the person just like, okay, Twitter, I'm leaving now. Because yes, well, thank you. All right, Tanisha, my partner.
Hey, what did I miss about Brock Lesnar? What just happened?
Oh, should we go into this, or should we table it?
What happened? Like, I know he's like a freak. What happened? Did he officially sign somewhere or what? I just know Jones called him out and was like, oh yeah, I'll your ass.
Yeah. Supposedly what I read is that Dana White has said he would be open for John Jones to fight.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Okay. Yeah. I honestly just want him to have like a hall pass and be able to go like, oh yeah, fight Fedor. Oh yeah, go to AEW, fight Kenny Omega. Oh yeah, go fight John Jones. Like, I just want him to, I don't know, just have a hall pass and be able to go everywhere.
I feel like he kind of already has that, right? Like you saw
he really does.
Like a free pass, and
I want that to just keep going. I want that, but I don't want like a year break in between each. Just like that guy is just so insane. And I saw him. God, I was an undergrad, so this had to be like 2003, 2004. Like, and when he was in WWE, and I was sitting front, like ringside, like front row, obviously, and just seeing him like being this close from him, like the dude's he's the size of a refrigerator, but that's just so wide, but chiseled, insane, and like the athleticism on top of that. I mean, being an Olympic, and just Division I wrestler in Minnesota, like. Dude's insane, crazy agile. So I just want to keep seeing him everywhere. Like,
I don't deny that. I completely agree with you 100%. I just like, what I don't like is that we're going to have, we already have to get, what's the golden snitch's name again? Kaminsky? The USADA.
Oh yeah.
I mean, John Jones. Oh, what is it? What is it?
Jeff Nowitzki.
Jeff Nowitzki. I was saying Kaminsky? I was close. I mean, we already have to deal with the, pictograms that are pulsing with John Jones. And if we bring Brock Lesnar, come on, you guys, it's gonna.
Both of them would just pop. Like, fine. Like, just have them just
have a whole pass. Like, let's just leave USADA.
Yeah. Or they should just make like another novelty belt, like the BMF belt, and be like, okay, this is the anti-USADA belt, and you can take whatever you want, and we would just, and we'll just fight. We won't test you. Like, and that could be that novelty thing. I don't know.
Okay, wait. So Anna, because I want to know your opinion on Brock Lesnar, and then Brian, and then I think that Josh is still with us, at least his book packet.
I think, like, my opinion on steroids and MMA is largely like, I don't care. It's more fun when people are on steroids. It's better for the athletes can recover faster. The injuries become less debilitating. I just don't care at all. Oh. So I'm like, Brock Lesnar wants to come to UFC and like fight John Jones. Awesome.
I'll watch him take, a bunch of cocaine and then Brock and, just get all the needles in the world. And then, that's why they should just have their own novelty belt, like take whatever.
Give them the small cage. Like,
I feel like it's Atticus, the way you kind of placed it, Nancy asked you, what do you think about Brock Lesnar? And the first thing you said was, I mean, steroids, like, it wasn't even really about him. It wasn't even really about him specifically as an instinct in your response, right? And then ultimately it came down to just like, here's how I feel about this massive issue in general. So I agree with you fully. I liken it to sort of like when you're dating somebody and then it's finally time for them to come and spend a holiday or something with your family, and say that your family, I don't know, is a little bit dysfunctional and likes to maybe drink and there's some other things going on or whatever. You want to uphold this impression so it doesn't reflect badly on you, but you have to bring them through this sort of gauntlet, and then they kind of, it ends up being this kind of relief, like everybody's more themselves, and it actually ends up being this kind of catharsis. That's how I see steroids / Brock Lesnar with respect to the UFC and all of that. Is it's like, it's a way for us to all be, it's a vehicle for us to all be more honest about what's really going on here, and in a more frontal way that I think is ultimately a catharsis for all of us. And as much as I'm not interested in it with respect to like sort of the craft, the types of fights that I like, or, whatever. And I certainly get tired of all the media repetition and, especially in the Brock Lesnar sort of echo. But I mean, bring it on. And if it's the right opponent, great. But ultimately I don't think he's going to do anything. I don't think this is actually anything.
Oh, well said. I loved your analogy to when people come together, it kind of loosens people up. That's great. All right. No, Rosenblatt, what is your ideas on steroids? I feel like it's Lesnar and steroids.
You can't have one without the other. You have to talk about it.
That's true. It's love and marriage, isn't it? I can't stand Brock Lesnar. Everything about him drives me crazy. I feel like he's emblematic of everything I don't like in the world, aesthetically, politically, size-wise. I find him ridiculous, and with apologies to Tanisha, the less MMA has to do with professional wrestling, the more comfortable I am with MMA. I know it walks those lines anyway. So, I mean, MMA walks so many different lines that you have to be careful of that I feel like I have to be vigilant, make sure it doesn't spill over. But yeah, I don't, he's old. He's not going to be good. And I can't imagine he's going to do it. They couldn't possibly pay him enough money to do it. Right. And I don't know. I mean, I would of course watch him fight John Jones. It just seems like a colossal waste of John Jones to have him fight Brock Lesnar. And it kind of feels like the longer MMA goes on, I'm sorry, I put my stand here way up. I just realized that. I'm sorry. The longer MMA goes on and the UFC goes on, the more it seems to become these kind of I don't know, freak show fights is the right description, but circus-y kind of fights, and it just doesn't interest me. I mean, I'll go with them to when they did the BMF belt, I'll go that direction with those guys, but I don't know. Call me conservative. I just kind of feel like I'd like them to get back to guys who are ranked higher than other guys, fighting those guys and moving up ranks and all that sort of thing. I don't know. I lose interest the more it becomes a circus.
No, I feel you on that. I do. And I think the freak show aspect of it is totally like, it's a good way of describing it, because it is just like a marquee name. Like, it's not, Brock wouldn't come back to try and get ranked and have another run, right? Like,
Right.
it's just a check. It's just a gimmicky kind of thing, right? And so that's why even before the trilogy with DC and Stipe was made, DC wanted Brock because he knew that was a money fight. You
Right.
know, and he's like, no, I want Brock, I want Brock, I want Brock. That never happened because, you know, he went WWE, and so then he was like, okay, fine, I guess I'll have this trilogy and then call it quits. So it's like they're recognizing that he's just a draw at that point, kind of similar to the way, I don't know, if you're on a card with Connor, then everybody else on that card gets more light and more shine, right? And so Brock, for some reason, has gravitated into that area of just being known as like that marquee freak show draw to sell. And John, I guess that I did see that Dana White quote was like, yeah, well, that would be a good introduction for Jones into going into heavyweight, I guess, was to take somebody who was a champion in that, you know, division before and has name and stuff. Although John on his own could sell. So it's not like he's dependent on Brock in that regard. But it is just, yeah, I feel you though about like all the other aesthetics and stuff like that. I just marvel at that shit. I'm just like, that's insane to me. But it is similar to, you know, like the Tyson Roy Jones thing. Like, it's just for geeks and nerds like me that will be dumb and be like, yes, I'll wear a spacesuit and go, that's fine. Just let me in that fucking building. But, you know, now that's not even gonna happen, I guess.
I think some of that has to do with this strange sense of ownership or propriety that we have with being enthusiasts of mixed martial arts, because ultimately it's like if your band makes a pop song that you've been into for a long time, your favorite band, and then they make a pop song and then it defines them, but you've been listening to their deep cuts and their early stuff forever, and you know, like all the weird intricate details of what is going on in the levels of that sort of pursuit that nobody really ever gets to, or very few people really unearth. And so but at the same time, you still feel this strange sense of
Ownership.
I want people to perceive it more closely to what I find most valuable about it. But ultimately, the Brock thing, or even the other sort of freak show fights, you know, Josh, it's funny when you said that. I was just thinking, well, what about like UFC 1? You know, like, but it wasn't with the names. And I think that there's something about the vanity and the marketing and all that maybe just makes it feel really different. But I mean, because ultimately, freak show fights is kind of what got us here. But at the
You know
same
what?
time, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Brian. I was just gonna say I liked your analogy to being into a band before that band gets big, but you have to add another level to that, where I think we're all, as longtime fans of mixed martial arts, we're always a little bit defensive and of MMA. So it's almost like this band that you love suddenly gets famous, and the entire world was just waiting for this band to get famous so they could point at that band and say, see, I always knew they were going to be like this when they were famous. So like, I feel like when the freak show stuff happens and that's what gets attention in the wider world, like that's when we realize, oh, no one's been paying attention to MMA. And now they all look at us and be like, see, you've just been liking this gross, violent spectacle circus sport, all this. And you're like, you swear to God, you're like, no, I swear to God, I've been paying attention to you know, different subtleties and chokes and variations in this guy's leg kicks for 5 years. It doesn't matter. Like, now the world just knows that you love Conor McGregor or you love Brock Lesnar.
Right.
It's
I mean, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it reminded me of like when you first started watching like Kimbo Slice, right? Like that was like your introduction into MMA a little bit, and that which was a very kind of backyard freak show kind of aspect, right? But it was your initial touch point introduction into this that got you starting to see, wait, everybody else knows that he would actually lose in a legit fight? Like what? And so then those questions and the curiosity that you got from that ended up sparking this kind of passion. And so I'm curious to see, or at least how many can attribute Brock Lesnar as that same kind of touch point in introduction, right? Like maybe knowing him from his pro wrestling background, knowing him from his actual collegiate wrestling background, or being on the training team for the Vikings and shit. So it's like, how many of those were introductions as to seeing him like, oh, okay, like actually being a champ, fighting Randy Couture, fighting Kane, like fighting everybody else. So it's just interesting that these different touch points, and I love the band analogy too, because it leads into that other conversation of like, when things go mainstream, what's lost, right? Like, what do people lose when things go viral or mainstream? Because then you've got that subset of like the OGs where we're like, man, we've been new, like we told you, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, and you lose something from that. But yeah, it leads to that larger kind of conversation.
Always. Nothing stays okay.
Ever.
I would love, this is an interesting conversation of what brought you in to MMA. I actually would love to know each and every one of you, because I'll have to be like, I feel like super corny, and I am part of that mainstream. I'm not cool. I didn't know the rock band when they were playing clubs and, East Village, because I was a boxing fan. I really didn't get into MMA until Ronda Rousey. And, my husband was watching, and I think I watched the Strike Force with her and Misha Tate. And then I was like, oh, this is MMA. I had a different vision of what it was when I was just kind of like a boxing, fan. And I had been surrounded and watched a few, but that was one of the things that hooked me. And I feel kind of stupid, like,
I wouldn't feel dumb about that. I mean, we all have, different, I mean, like for me, like when I was a kid, like, yes, boxing, my parents were like that pay-per-view house where all their friends would come over and drink. And I was the kid running around like, like, what is this boxing shit everybody's excited about? And I remember I grabbed my brother's tube socks and put them on my hands as boxing gloves. And I started punching a pillow and stuff because I wanted people to like pay attention to me and not the TV and alcohol. And so I always liked boxing just for like, I was like, oh, this is fun. But obviously like pro wrestling for me as a kid was my shit. Like that was my jam. I grew up watching that so much. And so then all of a sudden I learned about Ken Shamrock. I learned about, Tank Abbott. I learned about a lot of these guys that did a little bit of crossover. And then I was like, whoa, this is kind of interesting. But then it was really the first Ultimate Fighter. It was that reality show, Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner, that I watched that reality show. I remember being an undergrad and like Chris Lieben, Diego, like everybody, like all Koscheck, I hated him. And I remember watching that house and it reminded me of like Real World and MTV, like early 90s, mid 90s. And but they fight, this is awesome. Like I just loved that appeal. And so then I started watching, and Andrei Arlovsky was probably my first favorite fighter because he reminded me of a wrestler. Like he had fangs on his mouth guards. He had the hair, the chest hair. I was like, this dude's awesome. Like he reminded me of a wrestler. And so that was kind of my first, like that was really my induction in. And I was like, all right, done. And it's like my boyfriend at the time, like we watched all the time and would go to bars and stuff. And I was like, that was definitely so. That first season of Ultimate Fighter, was that like 04, 5, something like that?
Dana White and the Furtado brothers got it in 2003. And so I think it was like 2005, like very soon.
Something like that. Yeah. Like, cause I remember watching that and I was like, oh, done. Cause I just loved all the characters of it. And it was like a real pro wrestling thing for me.
So I'm curious, like Brian, what was your entry point in MMA?
I think it's funny because I too am not a pro wrestling person. I just can't. I don't even read fiction, right? Like I have a really hard time suspending my disbelief, and I'm way more concerned with reality than non-reality. However, I understand that it in its own right is a reality, and if you are able to sort of suspend your disbelief or blur your eyes or whatever, it's quite a ride, and it's full of it's got its own thing. And when you were talking about wrestling, I was like, well, I was into wrestling when I was pro wrestling when I was a kid, and in fact, it was sort of like the golden age, in my mind. It was like
Hogan.
Well, the first live match that I ever went to, wrestling show that I ever went to, it was Harley Race versus Ric Flair in like 1982, and it was insane, and the production at that time in the TV studio with Mean Gene, is that right? And
Mean Gene Okerlund,
yeah, just like that whole time was really formative, I think. But then obviously, you know, I sort of went away from it. But I think that that was actually part of what helped me kind of connect, in a strange way, my sort of entry into MMA. And for me, what really it was not necessarily long before what you were talking about, Nancy, but the moment for me where I realized I was way more deeply interested in it, as opposed to then just sort of casually catching it when it's around, was when I saw Daniel Cormier fight Bigfoot Silva in Strikeforce. And in a way, that was, to the naked eye at the time, that was a freak show fight. And you know, now knowing what I know it's not really a freak show fight at all. But that's the space in between the actuality of that not being a freak show fight, but looking like a freak show fight, speaks exactly to the stuff of like what it is I love most about MMA, because I'm watching Cormier and he looks like he's half the size of this. I'm like, how the hell is this guy even a like heavyweight? Like, this is nuts.
Yeah.
Like, you know, but and then just see how he just ragdolled him and all that. It was just like, okay, because I do feel like there's some sort of David and Goliath moment that it requires almost an unbelievable tension or some moment that seems insurmountable for you to really get it, right? Because ultimately, once you're way down in the weeds of it years later, you're really into these sort of very close matchups with very slight differences of ability or whatever. But I think it takes these larger contrasts in the early offing to sort of draw you in.
That's so true. And I want to get to Atticus, your entry point, and then wrap up with Josh, because I it is something, David and Goliath, or you know, maybe it's a hometown person who brings it in, but it is this larger thing. Because you're right, you do kind of like, not many people know what the matchup between Overeem and Sakai is going to be on Saturday. I mean, you have to really study to understand like what's going on there. But very interesting. Atticus, and like, I'm so curious what your entry point is. We're all going to feel really old, but that's okay. Oh, we can't. Oh, there you go. Good.
I was like 12 or 13. My dad is a lawyer, and someone had come into his office, and he had gotten into MMA when he was in law school. So my dad and I went over to his house, and I think we watched Kane versus JDS 2, where he just like wipes him across the canvas for 5 rounds. And then I didn't watch anything else for a few years. And then.
But that, you remember?
I remember that. I remember the main event. I remember being shocked at how many people have their names tattooed on their back, because that was just like weird to me.
Were you horrified? That's a pretty horrifying fight for a first fight. I mean, that's 2 enormous men, and one was just beating the other one up for 25 minutes. That was a rough one.
It was a very rough first fight.
Yeah.
And then
Atticus, that was the first fight I showed my mother to try to explain why I was into the sport. We watched it. I think it was around New Year's.
Yeah.
And she was reasonably completely repulsed by it.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
I was trying. She wanted to know. She couldn't understand. I had just gotten my job at Fightland, and she's like, "All right, you've got to explain to me what's going on here." So I was like, "All right, we'll watch an event this weekend." And that fight happened, and the fight with Joe Lozon and Jim Miller, where one of them got cut a little bit at the very beginning of the fight, and it was a grappling match for 15 minutes, and they were more blood than skin by the end. And my mother was like, "What have I raised?"
I love
they were
it.
in the deep end.
I know.
Yeah.
I thought about that with, you guys remember the Elkins fight from like May?
Oh.
And it was when there was no other sports on ESPN. And he looked just like there was blood. You didn't see a nose, you didn't see a face. And I'm like,
I just keep thinking of the Lawler McDonald fight. Like
that was the like fight 3 years later that I watched, and then I started watching them more regularly. I watched that entire card, top to bottom. Still, I think like the greatest event of all time.
I love a great event.
And then
Yeah.
starting with UFC 217, which was GSP Bisping, and then Rose, Joanna, and then a few others. Like between 189 and 217, I probably watched like every third pay-per-view. I watched the Rousey fights. I watched McGregor fighting. I watched Joanna fight a few times. And then I don't think I've missed 3 events in a row since UFC 217. I think I've watched like I've watched the majority of events since 217.
It's kind of an addiction. Yeah. It's something to look forward to. And yeah, no, I get it. So Josh, what was your like fight that brought you in?
I just want to say first, Nancy, you can't be called a Johnny Come Lately if you mention the word Strike Force in your first when that was your first fight. So I think you're good as long because it's not. I mean, if you asked anyone in this world what MMA is, they would say it was UFC. So you're good with the fact that it's Strike Force.
And I think like all of you, I did the deep dive back, which is so fun when you go through and you start to go and watch everything, and you can have all the time in the world. And that, yeah. So, well, thank you. I thank you for making me feel.
You're good. And I just want to say about in response to what Brian was saying, that I thought it was a really good point about the David and Goliath thing. I think that one of the reasons why a certain type of person gets into MMA, I know it was the case for me, and it kind of sounds like it might have been the case for Brian as well. But for someone who was not raised, or like I was sort of repulsed by violence and hated the idea of cage fighting and never fought and just really had moral problems with it. I think there's something about seeing those fights where Daniel Cormier beats a Bigfoot Silva, and you only get these in the heavyweight division now, where the sort of conventional wisdom or your inherited expectations about what wins a fight are flipped on their heads. That's when you could start appreciating it and trying to see the subtleties. Because as long as it was the biggest guy, the scariest looking guy, the most tattooed covered guy who was winning every fight, I was going to just be repulsed by it the same way I would be repulsed by a bar fight. But as soon as you see someone like Daniel Cormier beat up someone as large as Bigfoot Silva, then you start asking yourself, like, how did that happen? And that's kind of what happened for me too. Like Tanisha said, I read an article about and started watching Kimbo Slice videos. And in this article, they had interviews with UFC fighters talking about how Kimbo Slice really wasn't that good and wouldn't survive in the UFC. And that didn't seem to make any sense to me, because in these videos I was watching, they were backyard brawling videos. I was like, this guy looks like the greatest fighter in the history of the world. Because I didn't know anything about fighting. I just saw what he was doing to these other men in backyards. So it was sheer curiosity as to, I needed to know how it was that he could not be considered a good fighter if, again, I'm watching him just beat up a guy with his fists. He seems like a good fighter to me. And but again, and I think that this might be similar to the Cormier thing for Brian, I had the Fedor experience where I saw the first guy I really started to watch was a fat, balding guy who looked like he should be bowling, and his placid demeanor, never bragged, never boasted, never screamed. He was everything. He was the exact opposite of everything that I thought was true about fighting, and therefore everything I hated about fighting. And when I saw him beating up everyone, I was like, all right, there might be something in there for me. Yeah. that my expectations are getting blasted around. It was Kimbo and then Fedor.
It's so interesting you bring that up about about seeing this David and Goliath, and how seeing that it wasn't just thug versus thug, because Atticus, we just read the AJ Liebling article, Ahab and Nemesis. And what I love is that he talks about how we're going to get a little literary nerdy here. Pierce Egan, Boxiana, who wrote in the 1800s, how he would write eloquently about that brute force, because there is something special about having power, right? And he was comparing that to how, I think it was Haywood Braun, who was a boxing journalist in the early 1900s, and he considered Archie Moore as this styltician, like very much coming in with intelligence and fighting, not just as a brawler. And what I think AJ Liebling is saying, well, look, Ahab and Nemesis, the great white whale, Moby Dick, like they're both have attributes that we should always remember. and that we should recognize the specialness of someone who is cunning. And then like a Kimbo Slice, like the fact that people didn't think he was a good fighter, he had something special. And, you know, who brought up UFC 1? Because I showed that to my class, and many of them, oh my Lord, they signed up for this class really not knowing what they were getting into. Because, you know, when were they born? 2002? Yes. So watching UFC 1, which looks, you know, that's an old probably VCR edition that's been put on YouTube. They think they're watching like something from some crazy like attic, and they have no idea what backyard thing is Professor Kidder. And I show them the Toomey versus Gerard Gadou, that first one, and then the last one, which was Gracie, is it Horace Gracie versus Shamrock? And you wonder if we didn't have that, especially the third one. Let's forget the first one was spectacle. Come on. That was very David and Goliath though, right? Because you came in, he was wearing the gi, and you had Shamrock, who was physically imposing, probably steroids was going on. And who won? If like you wonder, do you think UFC would have had this kind of effect it had on people watching that if it didn't end with that David and Goliath moment?
Absolutely not. No, I don't. I think the six of us would be here talking about, I don't know, vacuum cleaners or politics. God help us.
Okay.
Absolutely not. And it was, I mean, it was built to be that way, right? I mean, the whole thing was, this was the Gracie's way of trying to introduce Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu into the United States. So they set it up so that they, you know, they put the smallest, weakest Gracie brother out there, as opposed to the strongest Gracie brothers. I can't keep track.
Yeah.
I think it was Hicks and Gracie, but
Yeah.
they put the scrawniest one out there to
Funniest
prove
one.
the point.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was, from what I understand, UFC 1 was largely a sort of like a promotional tool for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms in the United States. And I think if a giant sculpted, steroided guy with slick back hair, you know, did what we all thought he would do and beat up the scrawny little guy in the bathrobe, no, I don't think UFC and MMA would be nearly what it is today. I mean, it's pretty remarkable to think that it would come down to one thing, and that's a lot of pressure. But I think that you could probably make that argument.
Yeah. Isn't it funny though? I mean, we just had Fight Island though. So in a way, are we like, does it always kind of skirt spectacle? Because I think Chuck Mindenhall wrote like they didn't have the sharks and the moats, but it was pretty like crazy that they put this, you know, it wasn't an island, it was a peninsula. But maybe Brock is like part of it. Brian, I see you.
Well, it seems to me like it's almost like Dana White is some kind of a junkie, right? Because you think about the David and Goliath that the UFC was at the time in the earliest days, you know, and what they were up against just to survive and to continue. And, you know, we think about how much they put on the line to make it all happen. And I think that those kind of stakes are fitting for such a high stakes sport. So it's an interesting sort of reflection inside, right? But I think that when you think about Fight Island and all of that, it's like, you know, he's one of those people that just needs somebody or some set of circumstances or both to say this, something can't be done. And it's really, reinvigorated him. You know, you think about Dana White from, you know, right after the WME thing, and people were kind of like, he seems kind of half in, half out in a way. Like he's not nearly as, you know, he doesn't have the bombast, and he doesn't have the, you know, he's not, you know, ripping people at every turn anymore. He's kind of, seems like he's kind of, you know, fading a little bit. I wonder if he's really still into this, or when's he going to cash out? And maybe he's only just sticking around for a year and as part of some sort of contract term, and then he'll, you know, just sort of see the transition through, and then he'll leave. And obviously, you know, this was tailor made for somebody like him, you know, a megalomaniac that is, you know, hell bent on proving people wrong under any circumstances. So worked out. Fight Island was a perfect vehicle for that, and every possible bit of flair or exaggeration that could be even put around it was only another feather in the cap for him.
Indeed. So, you know what my husband was told me when I went down to get more caffeine? he said that he looked at Wikipedia and the UFC is on track to get to the 42 events if they have an event every Saturday for Atticus. What do you think about that?
I think it's generous to call what we've had full events. We've had like three round main events. We had Smith versus Rakic, and then nothing else on
Hey, if
last
Dana
week's
White was in
card.
this room right now, Atticus, you know what Dana White would say to you right now? You can't even get your bed shipped to another place or whatever, right? We moved mountains and armies of people. You can't even get a bed, so I don't want to hear about these thin cards.
Yeah. No, but I think it's like Dana White is a massive piece of shit. Like, I don't think anyone will disagree with that, but he is incredibly determined and he likes to be right and have money more than almost anything. And I think putting on 42 events like fulfills both making himself money and proving that he can do something people told him he can't. So I think he's like, I think he will put like unranked fighters on the top of a card on a week's notice before he will not have 42 events. And I think that kind of comes back to what, like, I feel like the theme of this has almost been, which is like the UFC and like the sport side and the spectacle side and how they kind of fight each other and how like starting with like UFC, I think like 185, there were the like Reebok shorts, they had the like standardized shorts, the standardized gloves, everything became more standardized, but you still have these just insane aspects that no other sport has.
Agreed. And I have to agree with you on the thin cards. What is anyone else's view on how it's been? Because
I kind of like the thin cards actually. I like the cards that don't really have a lot of hype and there's not a lot of preconceptions about whatever. It allows me in a way to sort of just appreciate the sport more, I think, for just kind of what it is and less about the things that we were maybe talking about earlier that are kind of a distraction from the things that, you know, we miss most. That being said, the ratio could be a little better, right? Like you still want to feel like at any point within a week or two something monumental is going to happen and we become hooked on that on some level. But ultimately I kind of like the thin cards. I you know, I like whatever black coffee, I don't know, like,
yeah,
maybe I don't know, I don't really
sport. And one thing they don't have the to worry that they're the only content out there anymore, right? And they've got competition now, so it's not like you have, you know, ESPN's coming up to them and saying make this, you know, a killer weekend, because there's other stuff out there. Okay, so Tanisha and Josh and Atticus, I mentioned another thing about why I find like we're having fight night, and guess where it is? Vegas. Guess what it's going to look like? You know, it's going to look like the Apex Center. They're wearing the standardized uniforms. They're blending together. I was like, Andrew, you know, we had Anthony Smith. I was like, wasn't he just on? I mean, maybe it's also the surrealness of time. I suggested they should do theme nights, like a disco or something, just to jazz it up. But you know, because we talked about this, came up. Do we miss the crowds or not?
No. I don't like crowds in general, but crowds at fights are reprehensible. And no, I like the quiet. I love, it feels surreal to me. It feels like an art, like it feels like weird, like black box theater or something. I love being able to hear things. I love being able to hear coaches. I don't like the giant crowds. And you know, like, I like that, and this is actually surprises me that Dana White is doing this. I like that he lets the silence be. Like if you watch an NBA game, they have fake crowd noise going on in the background. It's the strangest thing in the world. And that's another thing. I remember when the Redeem teams played that the first time, you know, when they got the gold medal back, the basketball team with LeBron James in the lead, and it was in China. And I remember I was a big NBA fan at the time. So when I was used to watching basketball, you heard the organs going all the time and the jumbotron saying defense, defense, and the crowd going all the time. And then you watch these games in China and you could hear professional basketball players, their sneakers squeaking, and you could hear them yelling to each other, guard him, guard him. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, you're getting a look behind the curtain. And when I watch these fights now, like, I feel like I get to watch the fights, and my impression of the fights aren't skewed by what is going on with the crowd. I love it. I would be perfectly happy if they just kept it this way forever, if it weren't for the fact that the athletes are going to make much, much less money because there are no crowds coming in. If they if they could figure that out, then I would be perfectly happy if there are never crowds again, because it doesn't affect me at all, because I don't particularly like going to live UFC events. I like going to minor league. I love the minor league fights, but I would happily never go to a UFC fight again.
So true. Now, Tanisha, I got to hear what you think about with wrestling. They're still doing it with no crowds, right?
Yeah, they've kind of started to bring in some fans. I haven't watched WWE in a long time. I don't know, but I haven't. And quality-wise, I don't know, just for a lot of reasons why I haven't. Vince McMahon and Dana White, I feel very much like what Attica said. It's like just massive racist pieces of shit, and they're like best friends with Trump. And it's no secret that, Florida that they were both deemed essential in Florida because they've both been like massive donors. All of that. I agree with you, Josh, about like the no fans, with UFC stuff. It kind of reminds me of like, obviously, like the Ultimate Fighter stuff. Like when they first started, there were no fans in there, right? And in these tournaments, and I like that. And it does give you that behind the curtain kind of aspect and that feel for it. I love it. And I love hearing them talk shit to each other, and like hearing the coaches and them being able to like even hear DC on commentary. Like I like that appeal of it. It feels like that, speakeasy Fight Club kind of thing. So I get it for that. But I like the ratio idea of just kind of closing it, kind of like what Brian was saying, but in regards to like, okay, I do like fan stuff. It's like I literally consulted work and like fan engagement, so you need fucking fans. But sometimes there is room to have this type of novelty experience where you can get into like the nitty gritty pieces of it, and then you can have a spectacle at the same time. So it's almost like making these metrics of like, okay, well, when do we have one or the other, right? It's like, as opposed to, having these thin cards with, a bunch of people that nobody really knows yet, but that's a touch point of like, oh, okay, well, let me just get familiar with some new faces. But yeah, if there is that way of like kind of closing the gap and at least having something in there that's a bigger draw and like for the overall experience. But I don't know, like the NBA thing, I love what they're doing. I mean, I've been like trying to be on the Clippers virtual fans. Like this is my time. Like my friends are doing it because they're season ticket holders. So they get like first dibs, at being a virtual fan. But it's like, yeah, I don't want to hear just sneakers the entire time, like in the NBA game. But I think that they've actually done a good job at making that ratio between like, obviously you have zero fans, but integrating like some technology and still making fans feel like they're a part of something. Like
the virtual fan thing is kind of interesting. It's just the sound of the crowd. Like I was watching the very end of the game last night. It was at Utah and Denver, which came down to the last, like it was like literally 3 missed shots in a row ended the game. And I was listening and I had forgotten that there was a fake crowd there. And when they missed that final shot, I was expecting this enormous roar of a crowd, but it was just the same level of roar that had been going on the entire time. And it was a little off-putting. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
Somebody's back there like pressing the like.
Totally.
Yeah.
They should have someone raising the volume.
I just want to say real quick that, for me really quick, I just want to say that it's like when I go to a concert and everybody around you is singing and I can hear them more loudly than I can hear the actual musician that I came to see. Like there's definitely levels in anything where it becomes like an imposition on anybody that's looking for a pure experience. However, that experience itself can be a lot of different things, So with the basketball specifically, I think that it's a little bit, I know exactly what you mean, Josh. And I love like the Olympics, my other favorite thing was when I remember back in the day when I had surround sound and I figured out that Bill Walton only came in on the center channel, and I could turn the center channel down and hear nothing but at least just the ambient crowd. So you're really fighting
Nice.
like, to me, the commentators usually are not pleasing for me. And then, I can't figure out why we can't enjoy sports in a choose your own adventure kind of way, because everybody's streaming everything. They've got the audio sources. UFC used to do that. I don't know with Fight Pass if they still do, but like you could just listen to the blue corner, listen to the red. Like you should be able to just go to a basketball game, listen to whatever bench, like you should have this choose your own adventure sort of audio sensory sort of experience in whatever hell way you want. I don't know why there's not more of a push for that, especially now when it's become more in relief that this is actually kind of cool and not something to just completely go away from. And we're going to miss it. And with the fights specifically, I feel like the only thing, maybe basketball is kind of the same, where it's like there's some intangible thing that happens in the energy exchange between the crowd and the performer, where it can propel and people can lock into a zone or some sort of metaphysical sort of harmony that all of a sudden the basket gets this big, and like you can feel that the crowd and the performer are sort of at one, right? In this way, people are elevating each other. And I feel like in the fights is kind of the same thing. Like I kind of miss only in those big moments. It really feels like it's falling a little flat when I just hear the commentators sadly, trying so hard to carry the gravitas and build moments, but it's just louder talking, so I don't know. I have some mixed feelings about it all, but ultimately I'm more on your side, Josh, but I do believe that there's an opportunity being missed in all of sports to really create the experience that you want to have.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's a lot of stuff that I've been like, at least talking to a lot of these tech developers about. And it's like, I was working with NextVR in Laguna Beach a while ago, and they, so you can right now like watch NBA games with virtual reality. And so they've been trying to implement that type of immersive experience where you can choose your own adventure, at least when watching, I think they've got deals with like the NBA. They tried UFC, but that wasn't really going anywhere. They've got it with WWE, whatever. But to be able to do that though without a 5-pound headset on your fucking face, that's the point, right? Because to be able to like right now, Clippers fan, I wish I could hear Ralph Lawler and Chauncey Billups and Brian Seaman on the call instead of Chris Webber, you know what I mean? Or I love Doris Burke, so I'll listen to her talk about anything. But yeah,
you don't like Chris Webber?
Huh? No.
You don't like Chris Webber? Oh man,
he's all right. I mean, no, not on commentary.
All right.
I know Kyle loves him. Like he's a Kings fan. But
I can't deal with Reggie Miller. He's the one I could never deal with.
Reg, he's from Riverside, like me.
How do we even get along, Tanisha? I don't get it.
I know.
But Brian, like the choose your own bench, it's awesome. The NBA, they've at least tried to start to do something like this, because a while ago, like once they re-upped their contract with Turner, so they started doing, and Bleacher Report, they started allowing games that were on TNT, with Inside the NBA, Chuck and Shaq and Ernie and Kenny Smith. So on those games, you could vote on Twitter for who you want to ISO cam on for the second half. So in the second half of the game, because everybody has a second and third screen now, right? So whoever got voted the most, like if you were watching Lakers Warriors, okay, Steph Curry gets the most votes. All of a sudden, the second half of the game, you could watch the game on your phone and have an isolated camera just on Steph Curry, while your main screen, the TV, is the full game. So you can kind of have like a dual screen experience that at least gives you a little bit more control on who you want to watch and who you're going to pay attention to. So, but they started these types of little baby steps, and I would love to see you, for your point, like integrate a little bit more.
Well, if you can ever tell anybody, what I'm really interested in is for basketball. I'm just interested in an anamorphic courtside view that is locked. You choose whatever, like you're choosing a courtside seat. You get like it's just a wide shot that's in the same proportion as if you're sitting there. It can be done. And then like, I would love to be able to see that in more detail as it's happening and understand what's happening. But no, I'm sitting courtside. Like the guy sitting courtside can't see if his foot was over the line or not. Like I want to be in that position. I want to just move courtside.
I think there's just too many people that look at sports still, and I'm guilty of this too sometimes, it's like a very social experiment, right? It's a social experiment. I go to sports bars, like that's why this stuff happens. I mean, I'm not right now, obviously. But it's like with virtual reality, at least, and why I think that was such a problem. It's like I can't, look at the person next to me and give them a high five and be like, "Oh, did you see that shit?" Like I would with this thing on my face. Like you can't do it. It's impossible. So having to implement now, like, okay, avatars and customization and all these personalization features, like in this virtual experience, like miss me with that. I just want to be on my couch, like at home. And per your point, be able to hear who I want, like Reggie Miller, Josh, like, Doris Burke, the local Clipper, broadcast team, and yeah, be able to sit kind of wherever I want.
Okay. I want to get more into that because I also think that we have lost, a lot of you talked about your first moment into MMA being either at a fight or at a sports bar or a friend's house at a party. Yeah. None of those things are feasible unless you're not being socially responsible, but let's just, take that. And I don't think that that's really going to be a thing where you can even have an audience without maybe your spouse, your local immediate pod bubble, until probably, I'm hearing like February, March, when things might really get more, they should responsibly start happening. So Brian, I first have to ask you, how would that be feasible to have a camera from every seat? Because you are Mr.
Not every seat, just like middle of like 50-yard line, like we're pick an optimal spot. I'm not, you could just have 4 cameras.
4 cameras, so they'd be up high, fixed.
Look, I'm not here to solve all the technical problems. I'm just here to tell you what I want and that I want it now.
Well, you're Mr. Drone guy, so I was like, he's got it figured out. They're gonna be drones.
Yeah, no, it's all about the human perspective. I mean, it's a funny thing. Like with a lot of the drone work I do, one of the things I learned early on that actually is the most simple thing that really sets a lot of the work I do apart from others is looking up. Even though just because you have something that can do this and look down on everything doesn't mean that you should. So by getting into more like median types of heights and looking up, it still reflects more of like the human perception. And I think that's people don't want a constantly novel alien view of everything, to understand it.
That is a good point. We should take that this rest of the week. Remember to have the human perspective, even if you can have the omniscient one. But no, I actually agree with you also about having these different audio channels because we can't go see our friends and do it. So what I would like is if I could listen and listen to you and Joe and Art Fight, and I could chime into a really nerdy. I mean, I don't think you take that.
It's a trip how the fight companion thing is really such a great thing, and it should be maybe more potted out into sort of social groups, right, and panel groups. So maybe that's something that we can figure out. Just the synchronization is always just the weirdest thing about it, and with a fight or anything where there's a sharp moment of something happening.
Oh, you don't want to hear that. I can't believe it. I know.
Yeah.
Okay, there are a couple of things. How are you doing on time? Because it's 5:02, just to let you know. There are a couple other subjects I think that are imperative to get it to because it's 2020 and what has been coming up this year. And one of those in particular is social justice, and especially with sports. And I would like to talk it because we just, had Jacob Blake, another senseless murder. And we had the NBA especially shut down, but only for a little bit. I'm curious because it seems like this is a moment in history when we wouldn't have seen this before. We saw what happened with Colin Kaepernick. What do you guys think and how it's being played out and what you guys see that the kind of the rest of the year going? I took it heavy.
Do you have another way of framing the question?
Well,
you mean specifically in relation to MMA?
How about the NBA? We've just been talking about the NBA. They shut down for 2 nights, I think.
Yeah, Josh and I texted about it a little bit. They did a pump fake, and I don't get it. But I also don't expect to I don't seek, guidance or what to do from rich 20-year-olds also. So I get it. I love when they did it, how they did it initially. And so I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. But then I woke up the next day and it's like, hey, we're back. I was like, wait, what? Like, what a fucking fate, right? But they start, and I understand the union, the PA for the NBA specifically, like the Lakers and Clippers were like, we're out, we're done. But I guess the rest of the teams in the bubble still wanted to play and realized that by having those conversations on that platform and on that stage, that's where more eyes were going to see that. Because some people were saying this, like when Doc Rivers, when the Clippers finally beat the Mavericks, I think after that, Doc Rivers had a really emotional press conference afterwards that went viral for a little bit. And people were like, hey, if they didn't have that game, his comments would have been totally missed. So that's why that platform matters. I get that. But what I wish I saw more from not only the NBA, but what other sports leagues can do. And I'll drop dead if the UFC or any MMA organization did this, because I just don't believe they would, is that actually do something. Like, I'm tired of people educating themselves. I'm good, do it. I'm tired of people talking about it. Great, have those conversations. But when are you actually going to do something? And what can you do? Like figuring that out on your own space. Because it's like, you can learn all day, but if you're not going to put into practice what you're learning, then what's the point? So, for example, like with the Bucks, when they walked off and decided to boycott initially on that Wednesday, great. That team owner got on the phone and started talking to the attorney general, because Kenosha, Wisconsin wasn't far from where the Bucks was. And Jacob Blake's still alive, remarkably. I don't know how you can take 7 shots close range like that and still be alive. He's paralyzed, but I think waist down. But
I apologize.
But no, yeah, but my point is that like they got on the phone and started talking to attorney generals, because the NBA has 30 teams and all of those owners, to my belief, is just rich white folks. And so, and all these people are the donors that start donating and to politicians, to the local offices and stuff like that. So unless you can start to make them force their hands, literally almost like a game of chicken. We're not playing. You're not going to exploit a league that's 90% black until you guys start to actually make some phone calls and change policies so that these things don't happen. Like, I don't want to be a hashtag, right? It's like, that's what everybody's saying. So unless you can start to actually pick up the phone and do those types of things like the Bucks did, which is why I feel like it was a pump fake. Because then all of a sudden by Friday night, I'm back to like putting my Clipper stuff on. I was like, wait, I was just mad. But per your point, and like, I don't know, and kind of to bring it to the MMA, I don't ever see that happening, ever. Maybe PFL, maybe a minor league, like Sean Merriman in LA has lights out championship, you know, they fight out of Burbank. Well, at least they were before, you know, everything happened. I don't know what they're doing now, but maybe some other organization, I'll give them a 10% chance of seeing something like that happen. But Kyle and I were talking about earlier too. It's like when George Floyd happened, it's like, what? They just put that title card up there for like 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sorry, bam. And then back to, you know, and then back to business as usual. So and that was probably 100% forced, or I don't even know if they even knew, like, whatever. Yeah. Felt like it was responsible, but I don't ever see that kind of happen ever in the UFC specifically, not while Dana's in charge, ever.
Well, it's another reason, that's another exhibit of the difference between a sport that has a union and a sport that doesn't have a union, you know? I mean, they can't, I mean, you know, if one fighter decided to boycott his fight because there's another police shooting, that fighter is getting cut, you know, that is goodbye to that fighter. That doesn't mean anything.
Lose my shit. That would not,
I mean,
yeah.
it would be amazing to see, but that fighter knows that he has no career after that in the UFC. So, but I don't know who I was talking to, but you know, talking about what was going on in the NBA when it was going on, and it was like, you know, there are no scabs. You know, if the NBA players walk out, who are you getting to replace Giannis or LeBron or Doncic? Like, that's it.
I know.
But it's one more reason why there should be a fighters union, and one more reason why there won't be a fighters union. You know, if Dana White wasn't afraid of unions before and completely anti-union before, now that he sees that entire sports leagues are being shut down because entire teams are deciding not to play, I mean, he's going to fight that. I don't even know if you could fight it harder than he has been, but
Yeah, because I mean, what he's been fighting it with is making up his own facts, right? Like I remember he was saying, he was like, oh, we're the only ones that are working with the government and health and medical professionals to try and get sports back. It's like, really, you're the only one? You're the only one on the phone, like talking to doctors and stuff. You're the only one talking to states and figuring out that you're okay. So like, he's totally made his own frame of like what's real, what's not, his own facts. And so like, yeah, for your point, like that's why he will be always like anti-union and stuff. But it amazes me. It's like, he's able to still, I think, do that when he has folks like DC, like still praising him, kind of, you know, like, I don't understand.
I mean, DC's pure company man. He is all in company man.
Yeah. And you see Michelle Waterman doing the same thing. And it's like, oh yeah, well, thanks. Like, he's still giving me a job. And I was like, bro, what? As long as he has to kind of, I don't know what secrets he has on these people or what, but yeah, like as he keeps getting these types of, you know, company men and stuff, like I think the only one with the balls to maybe do something like that, because he gives no shits, would be a John Jones, right? And that would be such a pivot for him, I think, from his own personal like brand standpoint, to be able to like, yeah, you know what, screw it. You know, and like stage a walk off or something. Like, could you imagine? Like,
we need to politicize a Diaz brother or two.
Oh yeah, they don't care. And I also think you know, someone who I hope beats Michelle Watterson is Angela Hill, because I think she was going to say something when she did win that fight against Gedalia, but you know, I just saw it another way. What I would love is for her to get real high in the rankings, and she would do something. I don't know. I have a lot of love for her.
Do you think there's something to be said for perhaps strategically playing, thinking about it in terms of playing a longer game, right? In terms, you know, somebody like Cormier, for instance. I mean, he just got, you know, he kept recently talking about, you know, the UFC gave him this $1 million bonus and, you know, all this. He's totally the company man, you know, going out in just the right way and all that. You know, and I'm not saying that like I expect him to now all of a sudden put on a hat of like, now I'm going to get to work on these other things, you know, but I do wonder if there is something about, you know, playing the long game, right? Like even in the NBA, I know you called it a pump fake, and I do get that, right? Because it's sort of like, if we're doing this on principles, are the principles just only on Thursdays, or like what I don't know. Like I can appreciate that there's for altruism, it's hard to put a governor on it or reconcile it to particular calendar days or whatever. But I do think that maybe in the longer game, on a larger scale of strategy, the NBA did exactly the right thing, right? Like, I'm showing you that I've got control of the gear shift, and I just took it from fifth all the way down to second and let the clutch out, just so you can feel what that's like for a second. We're getting a couple things done. We got these, you know, arenas turned into polling places or what, you know, we're not getting full on systemic change here clearly, and it's not going to happen in that, you know, just on that note alone. But then they put it back in gear, right? And keep the machine. I think it's nice sometimes to be reminded. It's kind of like you know, like, I don't know, when you're in the back seat and your parents are like slapping you from the front seat, you know you're getting out of line, and okay, like this car could stop at any time. I remember now who's in charge ultimately. And I'm not saying it's, I don't know what the best way is, or I mean, this is such a huge, you know, and what the role of sports is with respect to actual, you know, there's a whole lot to look at there. But I guess I was just sort of wanting to connotate that, you know, I wonder sometimes if there's not perhaps a longer game strategy sometimes.
Indeed. Didn't like LeBron James reach out to Obama to kind of help with this negotiation? Does that
probably, I don't know, like he has everyone's number.
I kind of feel like they're roommates, like perfect
I know,
kind of thing or something.
Michelle just
you know, I'm hoping, because I think that, you know, who would have known that what we would be in terms of the climate and the situation. But I do think that I had told you like a year ago that we'd have the NBA shut down, you know, because they were so upset, or this kind of, I mean, that you would have been like, what? You know,
yeah, it's like the one thing that I'll say positively about Chris Webber was that after the
Thank you.
Yeah, here it comes. The one night that they shut down that game, that Bucks Magic game, he said, if not now, then when? And I get the long play strategy of it, you know, of like, okay, well, obviously this is not going to be an overnight thing on the Switch, you know, like this is going to be a long process, but if not now, then when? And what are we going to do? And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm showing you that we're in charge. We have the union. Like we have the momentum. Like all eyes are on us, and sports being repositioned as like this prompt for social change now and stuff, or at least re-emphasizing that influence that it has globally. Okay, cool. But just let me know then, like, how many more have to get shot then before we say like no more, like ever. Like, what is that long game? And I think we just want to be informed and knowing like what that strategy is. But that's, you know, obviously like we're consumers, we're fans of sport, so they don't want to know. They don't want us like to know probably this stuff, or know that they don't know. Right? Do like there's a weird play between that and making that whole discourse about like, hey, yeah, like, we've got a long strategy in this. Well, what is it? Well, we don't.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, obviously people have to give up places of comfort, right, to do something, and so I get that too, you know. And I guess I was just wondering if there was any group wise, like any sort of perception of anything that was maybe not helpful in this last little spell that we've had here with like, you know, growth, hopefully. But in terms of just, is there anything that you've seen that's been sort of performative or just not helpful? Because I feel like it's a fine line. I mean, on one hand, it's like whatever works and whatever doesn't work, we need to just throw everything at this. It's not a time to sort of monitor our vanity or how we're perceived or whatever. Just shake things up. But at the same time, on the flip side, you know, you've got, you know, I don't know, just people you've got a lot of people that are just, you know, this kind of stick to sports kind of trip that people are on, and they don't understand that this is, and I'm sure Nancy, you've gone deeply into this, you know, this is not a new thing, right? This is not a new phenomena. And so, you know, there's that. And then, you know, like, I don't know, you see the John Oliver bit, you know, where he was talking about, I didn't even know this, you know, but the NBA jerseys, they had sort of prefabricated kind of like what the choices were on this rotisserie of what you could have as your sort of protest lettering on the back of your jersey. And they couldn't have Breonna Taylor. They had to have say her name.
Because.
So at that point, like, I mean, I don't know. Like,
it's like, that's a better catch line or
just, it's less. You can just see what the threshold is. Right? They're willing to sort of, it speaks of accommodation with limitations.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's probably why Jamal Murray had Breonna Taylor's name and face on his shoes, because that wasn't, you know, allowed on the back of his jersey. So I was like, oh, okay, well, and so then just put like BT on her shoe and put, you know, her little face on there. But yeah, I that makes sense that, you know, those types of, or like why they would want to do that. It doesn't make sense for me. Like why, I don't know. Like I just don't know when or what. Like I'm also just in this weird space of like, I'm not surprised by anything anymore. I'm fully exhausted. I want to see the Clippers tomorrow, you know, but it's like, and then I also wish like there wasn't anything going on, you know, but so I'm conflicted. And so it's just like, I feel like I'm in this weird video game where it's like I'm just driving and avoiding potholes and big rocks and things going around and like fire tornadoes. Like, what the fuck is that? And just like navigating around and just going around stuff, but I'm not questioning why any of these things are happening or falling around me. I'm just trying to get to the end of the road to do what the fuck I had to do. And I'm just not asking, why is that there? Whatever. And just keep going. Like, that's how I feel my life has been for 2020.
No. I hear you. And I wrote down how many more have to get shot before we get to that threshold. But I also can't help but think about how if we hadn't, I think we talked about this with our race and representation panel, Tanisha, about how it was really important, I think, that we did shut down sports because we didn't have any distractions from what was really happening. We couldn't say, oh, we just have to play on, right? And I got to remember that, you know, sports and entertainment, they do kind of, as much as I have a class on it, you know,
yeah.
But do they kind of also mollify us to be like, well, I got fights on the weekend and I want to make sure those happen.
It's almost like that I mean, it's no coincidence. I think we talked about it in one of those panels that like, it's no coincidence that like with the shutdown came the riots, came the protests. It's the lack of options, things to do. Oh, you can't go to Applebee's. All of a sudden, Karen became a thing. It's because when you make people who feel entitled and automatically privileged, no, you have to play by the same rules as everybody else now. Ape shit.
Yeah.
Everyone in Orange County, ape shit. Got guns and stuff. And then you start to see the differences between the way whites and blacks are treated. Cut to where we are right now. Yeah. None of it is an accident or a coincidence.
No. Because Tanisha, I mean, black people were being killed in 2019.
All the time. Yeah.
And, you know, but it would just kind of take the news cycle and then, you know, and so we just look away.
Yeah, but it's like, you can't go get a haircut or a pedicure or go to Applebee's or watch anything going on. And it's like, all of a sudden it's like, wait, what? But I'm special. I've never been told no before. People that never had to be people who had to wait in line just like everybody else to get some toilet paper. Yeah. They're like, but where's this privileged aisle? Like, no, you don't get one because you're a human just like everybody else. But no, but I'm a special human. No, you're not. You have to wait just like us. You have to wear a mask just like I do. But it's forcing people who have never had to ever follow a rule because they were literally made to benefit them. Now that this is where we are. That is like the theme of 2020. In addition to just taking away people.
It's like kids that are like playing on the playground. They make up the rules you make up the rules to the game, and then all of a sudden you're losing the game that you made up the rules for. So you're like, I don't even want to play anymore.
Yeah, it's like I did that when I played tetherball. I was like, oh, only people over 5'8" can play.
Yeah.
You know,
this game is stupid.
No, you don't touch it. It's if you have to like touch twice and like, you know, yeah. No,
no ropies.
Yeah. It's no, and it's also like there's a part of me that wants this kind of equity that we've built now, where we've taken away that privilege of you don't get your Applebee's like anyone else, and no one's getting their Applebee's, hopefully. No, you know, no shame to Applebee's. It's a great place. But I do think that I kind of hope this continues for a while because I think a lot of work is getting done and a lot of focus is on it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's, you know, the positive part of this is that you hope that some people would glean it up as an opportunity to, you know, be better informed and make some, you know, activate some awareness and look in and be like, oh shit, like I guess I was, you know, or, you know, the amount of followers and friends and contacts that I've lost after all of this stuff. I'm like, cool, cutting the fat out of this stuff because I don't want to, you know, like I have a friend that like literally went Karen and was like D.L. Hughley was tweeting about her and like went off and I was just like, you gotta go. Like I knew this was in you, but you just.
You had a Karen friend?
I do, yeah.
What happened?
She is a bar owner, former LAPD officer, and her and her husband went off on a fruit vendor that was on the street and was like, you can't be here, it's fucking ghetto, you look like trash, blah, blah, blah. And he was doing absolutely nothing, but because she had the health and beverage department like on her ass for her own bar, she went across the street and started, you know, berating this fruit vendor. But it completely backfired because then they started protesting outside of her restaurant and her bar and started exposing all of her dirty laundry, like getting multiple DUIs and being fired from the LAPD and all of this stuff and domestic violence and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, oh, really? Okay, like you have an air-conditioned, like giant business that's been able to still open, but because you have to go through a few, you know, legalities or whatever, like you got to go across the street and put all of your angst and issues like on and project it on somebody else who's trying to sell some frozen watermelon sticks on 100-degree heat, you know, in Pacoima. So it's like, what are you doing? So, but yeah, it went viral for a while, and I was like, like,
no,
man,
you know, but it's. Yeah, cutting the fat off of
I know. Sorry for all like Karen Bryant. She's a Karen with a Y. So
yeah, those totally.
Karens. Okay, I know that we're probably need to start wrapping up. But there's one other, because I actually want to get back to MMA. I want to ask, like, who should John Jones fight? We kind of started with that, so I want to close that one out. At heavyweight. So the last kind of place where I actually see where we might still have some work, and we talked about this, Tanisha, with Professor Lewis Moore,
Yeah.
and that brought up by Sean Black as well, is college athletes. And Atticus, we know that earlier this summer, the Ivy League postponed it, the Patriot League, which is American University, postponed, and a lot of other ones. And then it was looking like a really good thing because the Big Ten made a decision. Wow, you know what? Most of our students are not going to be on campus. It's probably a football team itself is a large gathering. I mean, just the one team with your defensive coordinator, your, water boy, all those things. Probably also traveling and intermixing 18 to 22-year-olds. Probably not the best idea. Everyone thought that the Big Ten was going to be this domino effect, that the ACC, the SEC, I do think the Pac-12 may have postponed, but mostly all the big major ones outside Big Ten are still going. And I know for a fact, because my brother-in-law went to University of Miami. They are going to be in the stadium. Oh, yes. They are going to have the Hurricanes in the stadium. That's the same stadium that the Dolphins play, with crowds. I mean, it's 15%, but
yeah, I think the Chiefs said at Arrowhead that they were doing 20 to 25%.
And we're postponing the whole thing. And then I heard, I don't know all the facts on this, that President Trump actually called the Ohio State president or some other people to try and get them to get Big Ten to come back in. How do you think this is all going to work out? And I mean, I'm just doing predictions. And what do you I guess that's the question.
I don't know the political stuff as much because it fucking detests me, but I know that for Trump, it was very, if I was a Trump person, I would be, which I don't know. It's like oh, hell yeah, get Big Ten to, about face and agree, because the electoral votes that are within those states of the Big Ten is the only reason why he gives a shit.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know what Iowa, or Michigan, I don't know what numbers, how many votes each of those states are worth, but I know that is exactly the only motivation behind it.
The Big Ten, because they would go apeshit.
Right, because also I think they said too this morning, I was listening to Graney on ESPN, and he was like, the president of the Big Ten is an epidemiologist, so that's why he was like, fuck no, because he actually knows science.
Thank God.
God forbid. So he was like, no, go fuck yourself. We're not doing this. Do you know what this virus is? And so that's why most of them backed out. But yeah, you have the big three, of the power, SEC, obviously, ACC and stuff. They're like, no, we're fine. But yeah, that's the only reason why they've still been no, because they actually have someone, who believes in science.
Yes, thank God. Atticus, do you have any thoughts on what's going to happen, or what?
People are going to get sick and die.
Yeah.
But University of Alabama, I think, has 494 people sick, and that's just people they've tested. And that's new cases over, I think in the last week, 494. And I also think, like you said, I think Trump, despite the American right insisting sports is apolitical, which sports has never been apolitical, it's Trump has especially during the pandemic, has he's aligned himself with I'm gonna bring sports back, and that's the big shiny idea he had. That's why he had Dana White and Vince McMahon and Robert Kraft all in that special meeting. He created a special task force. He's tied himself to this idea of sports being present, and also just bring it back to the last point for a second. I think because of how short-lived they were, I don't think the NBA players going on strike really did anything.
Good.
But I do think that it had more of an impact than it would have if there was not a pandemic, and if like Trump hadn't already aligned himself as this person, and like with him the Republican Party, he's not one person, but it became an even more explicitly political statement when the idea of sports rather than the content of sports is being politicized more, I think.
I agree.
Atticus, I have a concept for you. I'm just run it by you. What if there was an all steroid MMA promotion, right? It's like it's required that you're on steroids, which we kind of already have that, but let's just say it's open and sanctioned. And then combine that with the pandemic situation, right? Anybody that's just like, I don't care, I'll, whatever, I don't care about science. Like the NBA had a bubble to sort of keep COVID out. We could come up with a concept to sort of keep COVID in. And then the whole sport, and it's sort of like an Ultimate Fighter, kind of like like they're living in the house, like, oh my God, they're drinking out of each other's glasses, they're breathing in the same air, whatever.
They're all juiced up on steroids and angry.
Heroin too. Let's just like give them electric guitars, see what happens. But no, but ultimately, like, what if there was a way to sort of put all this together for you, Atticus? I was just running that by you.
I mean, it just sounds to me like you want another Bellator heavyweight tournament. So. Like,
former student Atticus, I mean, what is it? The student has surpassed the master. That was
seriously.
By the way, Atticus, I just want to say also that I'm not sure what your ultimate pursuit is yet, but whatever you're gonna do, you're gonna be fine because of your name being cool.
Oh.
I don't have that. Like I don't have that quality. So your name, you could be an architect, you could be a rock star, you could be a writer, you could be whatever you want, but you're always going to do fine. It's kind of like Lance Armstrong, right? Like, what was he going to be? Like a plumber? I don't think so, right? Like the guy was going to be like an unparalleled, endurance athlete. So I'm not sure what Atticus Crow connotates exactly, but I think that you do.
I love it. So Atticus, whatever you do, just bring us back and we could talk about how we knew you and maybe corrupt you with this crazy over intellectualizing, theories that we have on sports and culture. Well, I do have to say, just to add to this conversation, because I'm fascinated, obviously being in a university and seeing the response, because what I've seen is a little bit of have we used the word catch and bait yet, or is that right? Bait
and switch.
Bait and switch. Man, is it 5 o'clock or later? Bait and switch.
Catching and baiting that'd be a remarkable achievement.
That would be really odd, right? Come here, bitch, and then I'll use some bait. Bait and switch, because I think that we've a lot of schools didn't want to say, look, this is not possible, when we all knew. I mean, God bless. I've been an 18 to 24-year-old, and my brain was not fully developed, and risky things seemed so cool and awesome. And I wanted to hang out with my friends, and, I wouldn't, that's what you do. And so the idea that we were expecting them to come, and then what UNC has done, what Notre Dame has done, is blame the students for it failing. And I think that's been just awful. I was so glad American went remote, because we were realizing this is going to be a shit show. It's,
Vanderbilt here published this whole thing, and it was exactly that. But they even went so far as to say, like, you being here, you need to understand that you need to be valuing your education so much that you're willing to do whatever it takes to have it, and be willing to sort of, govern yourself. Like, totally unrealistic. Yeah.
No, and it's newsflash, students aren't always thinking about their behaviors and education, unfortunately. So I worry that not to say I'm not kind of giving kind of a stereotype at all to some of these athletic teams, because I don't know, we're expecting them to be perfectly behaved in their bubbles and travel. But I also do know, Tanisha, is that they do have power, and I hope they know this. The fact that we could have a president who did call up these heads to try and get it. What if the students who, and we know, football, basketball, primarily Black men, said they're the ones who said, no, we're not, so that's what Lewis Moore said, that, would be unique, because bringing it back to fighting, which we always try and do here. He said, that when Black Americans started to join prize fighting in the late 1800s, because it was an amateur sport, you had your boxing clubs and, amateur, not much on the line. But when Black Americans and, Blacks in the UK came in, they're like, look, if I'm going to fight, I want to be paid. And he said that's the rise of the professional sports athlete went along with the Black boxer. So there could be a rift here that could make student athletes get their, due respect and, what
sure, because it automatically goes to, negating what the NCAA always believes. Like, no, they're students. They're not, they shouldn't be paid. So now looking at them as like employees, or as opposed to like just being students, and it just speaks to the whole like unionization of it and labor exploitation. So it's like, if you can establish labor rights, then it's like you're recognizing that they're not just students. They're not, a biochem major, but then they're willing to say like, oh, okay, no, that fullback can come on campus, but not, a creative arts major. It's like, oh, because you value that big Black motherfucker more than, somebody else, like the athlete, like that's who you care about. Like, obviously now you're seeing like where the emphasis is and what's at stake for the larger university because of the money that they make off of exploiting, predominantly Black athletes. So yeah, like you said, it goes all the way back to, and reiterating some of those things that Professor Moore was talking about.
Yeah. No, and Alicia, not even just that they're more valuable, you're putting that student at risk.
Yeah, it's like his life, his health is expendable.
Yeah. Other people, please don't come on the campus. We want you, but
if you run a 440, you can come.
Yeah. All right. So getting back into fighting, I think there are a couple questions I think I had asked you guys, but so John Jones is heavyweight. How much do you think he'll bulk up a bunch, or will he be a small heavyweight?
Hey, Nancy, I've got to get going.
Oh, all right.
So before we talk about how much John Jones is going to bulk up, I'm going to slip out the back door.
You slip out the back door? Well, enjoy. I like your haircut.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I was going to mention
it's my quarantine by pandemic haircut.
Did you do it yourself?
You know what I was thinking the other day, because it's actually grown out a little bit, so I had shaved it pretty close, and I was thinking to myself, the only good thing about the rise of the alt-right and the new sort of fascist Nazi types is that they have ceded the shaved head to intellectual pseudo artist types, and because they've got their fancy fashy hairdos now with all the product and everything, which means I can be completely lazy with my head and not be associated with the worst people in the world.
These are the small wins.
My two favorite things combined together.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Josh.
It was great seeing you guys. It was a pleasure to be back with all of you.
I know.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. So how about we also just, for time and everything, I know it's 5:37. Who do you think that John Jones should be fighting in heavyweight? I guess, do you know, Tanisha, you want to go?
Rock. I'm all in. Rock. Screw it. I'm all in. Rock.
Okay. Who's Brian?
This is a no-brainer. He's going to need time to bulk up. Francis has to be ready, and that'll be the ultimate comeuppance, I think, for Francis, and at the same time, perhaps something karmic on the other. So I don't know. I think that Jones is going to have a lot of. He doesn't have a lot of punching power, I mean, he would murder me in 2 seconds, but in the heavyweight sphere, he doesn't have that kind of power. And even with the weight, I don't think he's going to have it. So I think that he's going to bulk up all he wants. He's still going to have, you know,
Like a
I
Randy
think
Couture
some
or
challenges.
something.
I think he's gonna have some challenges. I think he'll do great, except for I think Francis has a very good chance of knocking him out.
Yeah, I just want Francis to. I feel like he's already earned a title shot again, like with Steve Ray. So I just want that, and I don't want like Francis to fight Jones, and then like God forbid, I don't know, he loses or something, and then Jones trumps him. I hate even using that phrase now.
I know.
Like, trumps him to get a title shot already after having like one fight in. So I'm like, no, like I just want a novelty, and then like have Francis already fight, and if he loses, okay, cool, then yeah, get them going.
Yeah, it's gonna be the winner. It's gonna be the winner of Francis Stipe's outcome will depict everything.
Yeah, because I agree with you though. Like John's, I think he's gonna have more of like a Randy Couture when he went up to heavyweight kind of game, because he's not necessarily known for power and strength, as opposed to just finesse and being a practitioner and like just chopping dudes down and embarrassing them. So yeah, he's gonna have to rely on everything else as opposed to like a knockout punch like Francis or Derek Lewis, or even Curtis Blades, but Brock. That's what I want. I want Brock.
I think that John Jones's biggest danger going to heavyweight that I haven't heard anybody sort of talk about is that he's going to become a not exciting fighter. And that's my guess, only in the sense that heavyweight, we want things to be a little more compressed, and he doesn't have the punching power to knock a lot of people out, and so he's going to be taking people to decisions. And I think it's going to. I don't know. I don't think it's going to have the pop that people expect.
That's a good point, because a lot of people, in combat sport, boxing, MMA, they always say, heavyweight division will be like the strongest. And when combat sports is the most popular and powerful, you have a strong heavyweight division. And it's like, okay, coming off of, a trilogy, DC retiring, Stipe fight, that GOAT conversation, and everyone like bringing up like, oh, he's the best ever, like that big Stipe. And I'm like, Fedor's online too. Like, you can have those conversations. So it's like, well, all right, now we're talking about the heavyweight division a lot. All of a sudden, here comes John Jones coverage. So it's like they're putting a lot of weight and emphasis on this division again, which I'm cool with. It's fine. Like 135-pound men are just weird to me. But like, okay, but per your point, sorry.
I'm like a $155. I should be a $155.
Okay, see, yeah, you're like lightweight. That's fine. Yeah, it's just bantamweight adult men. I'm like, but yeah, per your point, I am afraid too that with attention comes greater risk, and that being, if this division, if he goes and it just becomes boring, then it's like, all right, we're back to just focusing on elementary sized men.
Well, the other thing I'm surprised at also is that he did not take the opportunity to fully. I know he claims to have sort of cleaned out his division, but there's a lot. There's questions, man.
Hey, like, yeah, that stuff was quite.
And yeah, I see like the only clean exit for him without there being not an asterisk or whatever people want to, some sort of lingering caveat forever. I mean, he's still going to be always greatness, but man, I mean, he's by not being hell bent on a rematch to prove a point and then get out tells you something.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree. I think he pretty clearly lost to Dominic Reyes. I thought that that's one of the easiest fights to score I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 48-47 Reyes. And I think John Jones has I think he's been so good and was so good early that he's never felt like a pressure to really get markedly better.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is light heavyweight is a shallow division, and it always has been. It's been relatively stronger because when the UFC started and MMA was around early, it was like a big man sport. But because of the freak show fights, because of pride, because of everything like that. But once the UFC absorbed the WEC, smaller fighters are faster. 135 is a deeper division than I think even than anything like 185 and above. light heavyweight is a bad division, but heavyweight is a terrible division. And I think John Jones is like, well,
Yeah.
might as well.
Yeah. No, and so who would you want him to fight then, Atticus?
I want him to fight Brock. Like, go full freak show. It's
Team
stupid.
Brock
Go
right
fight Nagano. I want him to get knocked out by someone. I think
I
Yeah.
love this Schadenfreude. Am I saying that term of wanting vengeance through an act? I think that we all kind of want that, whether it's in by, Brock coming in and, just having that spectacle. I see Nagano because of he could literally take his head off if he's in the right moment. I'm actually going with Stipe, and I have a soft spot for Stipe because I think that it would be great to see. I mean, it's so good versus evil, right? I mean, he's a fireman. He was a first responder. He's so but problem is he's a little boring, right?
John Jones is also a first responder. He was out in the middle of all that pandemic, late night, and helping out homeless people. So,
You're right. They're both do-gooders, but I would find, and I guess for me, I have this, I just, maybe it's the Ohio aspect of it, but I want to see Stipe have that. I don't want him to have to fight Nagano again because that was rough. I mean, he lasted that first one, and Nagano has gotten so much better in the last 2 years. I've heard Dana White saying that Nagano has earned the heavyweight title. I really want the big bucks to Stipe. I want him to get through. And so my vote is for Stipe Miocic, however you say his name, even though I love him.
He wouldn't be the first, John wouldn't be the first to debut in a title fight, right? Didn't Brock do that?
I think that, didn't Brock, I think
Brock did that. He came in, his first fight he lost his first fight against Frank Mir in an ankle or he got tapped in the first round of Frank Mir, I think. Or no, he beat Randy Couture for the title in his heavyweight in his debut. And then I think he lost it to Frank Mir. And then I can't remember. Then he lost it to Kane.
Debuting. I mean, you had Conor McGregor fight Alvarez for the title going 145 to 55.
And DC
Right.
did DC Stipe. Yeah.
So I think John Jones could call out whoever he wanted.
Yeah.
Who do you think Jones wants to fight?
Yeah.
Brock.
I have to head out very quickly. So good to talk to you all again. I'm looking forward to the next one.
I hope you get a bed and a
Take care,
desk.
Atticus.
Yes, I hope I do too. All right. Bye.
Till next week.
Bye.
Bye. And then there were 3.
And then,
Bye.
Yeah, I'm on the clock here too, but I'd like
I
to
know,
wind
I
it out
know.
nicely with you.
I appreciate that. Well, so you think that John Jones wants to fight Brock because it's the money?
at least that's what he tweeted, or who's in charge of his account. He was like, I'll beat your ass too. So I don't know, actually. John, I don't know, ego head that he has.
I feel like John knows that fight actually would never materialize, and
Yeah.
that's why it's convenient to say that, because then he's already talking big
Off the
smack
hook.
at the heavyweights and whatever. I think the fight he doesn't want is the Ngannou fight. I think.
Yeah.
I don't think that's. He's just the person that nobody wants to fight because
He's terrifying.
you can have all the most we have nuanced skills of all kinds, and that guy he's just doing this. I don't know, he's just doing this, and then
So true.
yeah, I don't know. It's insane.
Well,
So,
I'm actually picking another totally out of the box. I would want John Jones to fight John Jones on Twitter. You guys know who that is? The one?
That's real, like the other guy. Yeah.
He is hilarious. I would want that. John Jones squared. But let's end on that. But so again, Tanisha, we need to get together because
Yeah.
4:00 Wednesdays, everybody. We're gonna be here. I'm gonna hope to bring guests, but you are always invited, Brian.
well, thanks.
Always.
So is this going to be this is your weekly?
Weekly talk, panel, guests. Who knows what we'll bring?
Well, here's the thing, though. My only question, though, and my only parting
Yeah.
question that I want you to ponder until the next week is: if you do this right, and you do it every week for a long time, is it going to get stale to the point where maybe you need to start having themes? Like
Oh my God.
Hawaiian or
Disco.
That is why
disco.
next week, disco. I want you guys to wear your 70s apparel. you know, do the big afros, do the big collars. It's disco themed.
Hey, I'm working on the afro thing. Like I have not
Yeah.
gotten a haircut since March,
I
and
like it.
I'm
I
turning
do
into.
like that. I like what you're
I
doing.
like curls.
If you were here in person, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's not great.
You almost, can you pull it back?
I don't want to talk about it. I'm already getting like man bun threats from my wife.
Man
So,
bun. Oh,
Yeah, man bun threats, by the way, is also a solid band name idea. But anyway,
Oh, wait, so Brian, can you just say, I don't know if anyone's out there watching, but I want to know where we can find your stuff, including the work you've been doing. I know we talked about drones, but
so all of my drone and video and music score, soundtrack work, everything is all at thosedrones.com. And you can also follow me on the gram, kids. And then we also, we have the Art Fight podcast, which you can find everything at artfightpodcast.com. And we do a live show on Thursdays, and you can find us on the Twitters and the grams and all the places. And we do the best we can to keep all that stuff kind of going. But yeah, we got some exciting shows coming up. We've got Michael Chandler coming on. We've got
cool.
And some
Nashville
other
resident, right?
Yeah. He's one of those where it's just like, I can't believe it's not, only happening now. It should have been a long time ago, but so happy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he just came off a big win.
What time on Thursdays?
So what time is it? It's at 5 p.m. Central, so 6 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, I think.
I think you got it.
Yeah, I just have my machines remind me when I'm supposed to do things.
Yeah. That's what I was telling my machine. Like, hey, I have a thing. At like
and we do it live, but that's just because we're recording it anyway. It's not like something happens live that really matters. It's more like just that's when we're taping it. So you can pick it up, and it's we've been mostly an audio podcast up until this time. So we have a pretty good library of audio podcasts and stuff. You can find us on the Spotify and all that. So but yeah, and thank you again for being a part of that last sort of wild fiasco.
It was great what I got to see too, and chime in on Twitter. Flat joke for me too. My Gemini brother with crisscross kinfolk with the backwards overalls. Where is he? Why did he come on today?
Well, I'm super excited for you doing this weekly, and thanks for giving me the permanent invite.
Awesome. Of course, always. And also, I would recommend people, like, if you watch Art Fight on YouTube, they will do the chat thing, because you can kind of troll them and ask them questions about Taylor Swift, and you ask these really smart, cool Nashville types, and they have to talk about Taylor.
Yeah. No, it's funny because it's like we've just been audio only for so long that now we've kind of forget that there's all these other pieces that we can kind of play with now. So we're just kind of turning the corner on that. But thanks again. Yeah, it was awesome. And thanks for the discussion today. It was really good.
Oh, I know. I love it. I've missed it.
Yeah.
So Tanisha, you're in Vegas, and like it looks like you're doing a lot of like tech stuff,
consulting stuff. Yeah, but I'm excited. I'm actually going to be launching my own podcast too next month, which I'm excited about.
Great.
Yeah, I'm joining the club. Got my Yeti blue mic. I'm ready to go. It's called.
Nice.
Give us the deets. We want to know.
Yeah, so it's going to launch next month for sure. So I hope to start recording some episodes by the end of this month. It's called I Have Questions, because naturally I do. So looking to, have, very story driven, talk about commitment, fandom, and how all that relates into the human experience and what people have to do to feel safe, sane, and entertained like throughout everything. So
that's awesome.
I like culture and conversation collide. So I've got a Twitter and Instagram account launched for it now. So you can check us out there, like IHQ Podcast, I think on each. The website is launched, ihavequestionspod.com. So hopefully that will get that rearing, so have a nice fall launch and get that going. Still teaching a couple classes.
You. That sounds perfect for you. It sounds so you. It's great.
I'm stoked about it. I'm stoked. Yeah, and I have like mascots. I have like my Ric Flair pop action figure, and then I have these two owls over here that I call like Hootie Hoo. And so they're my podcast mascots. And but yeah, and then otherwise just still teaching online. And I didn't get to tell Josh, but yeah, I have his book in my curriculum too, for my community psychology class, talking about, you know, narrative persuasion and meaning making and stuff. So I have his book in there. And yeah, what else am I doing?
Rosebud is taking over the college.
His head is going to get so much bigger than it already is. Like he's gonna be unbearable.
We need to form some sort of a network here, because I feel like that we're all sort of constellations on this particular bandwidth.
I
So
know.
I just want to posit that in your
I know.
wild minds.
Yeah, I'm gonna let that marinate. I like Blaze.
I know.
I know. All right. Well, I'm out of here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tanisha.
We'll be in touch.
All right.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Later.
I appreciate it. Bye.